energetic drains. So this covers energy vampires. This also covers things like egregores and demons that can latch onto people, and those can sometimes be energetic drains. You might think somebody's an energy vampire, but actually they're being vampirized by something else. And then I also want to talk about energetically draining situations and how to deal with those metaphysically. So, with the subtle body. So, your subtle body, right? That is the field kind of all around you. It is your auric field, but it's also a little bit further out than that. It's kind of the boundary of your personal space. And defending that at all times is very taxing, and in some ways it's not really worth it to try to defend your whole personal bubble all the time. That would be exhausting. Obviously, you need to have a place where you can go and recharge, which is what makes ASMR videos so great. Now, when you are cultivating a space where you don't have to maintain energetic defenses, it can be difficult sometimes, especially in this economic climate where a lot of people have roommates, they're living with their parents, and other people, other kinds of living situations that everyone around you is not going to be on the same page spiritually and metaphysically that you are. Obviously, if you're coming here, you're probably in a pretty good place metaphysically, and I'm not saying that because I'm trying to toot my own horn or anything, or make you feel better than anyone else, but you are seeking out information and higher knowledge, and not necessarily catering to your comfort, which is one of the things that makes it difficult for me to have a successful YouTube channel, because as much as I want to integrate the ASMR aspects, I'm not really trying to create like a bubble of comfort as much as a bubble of growth, and growth is very uncomfortable. Anyhow, so yeah, you can just watch my eyes. Back to cultivating your space. Now, as I said, this can be kind of tricky, but there are some things that you can do to create a space where you can recharge. You can create a space on the astral plane, and I am working on astral topics in the Pathworking series. The purpose of that is to actually cultivate these astral spaces where you can perform ritual work and spell work, and also rejuvenation type processes. So, even if it's your car, it might even be a closet useful space for doing this type of work. But I know even when I was at one of my previous jobs, there was a park nearby, and there was a little kind of derelict tower. Oh, it definitely looked like somewhere where people would do satanic rituals. And it was always full of frogs. There was a hole in the ground, and there were always frogs in that hole, which of course I find very relaxing. I could just sit there and stare at frogs, and it would really bring me inner peace, and it helped me a lot during that time. So there will be a space like that for you out there, but you just have to find it. The second part of this is obviously going to be eliminating as many people from your life as you can that are an energetic drain to you. There's an even exchange of energy between most people. I live here in Los Angeles, and admittedly, a lot of the people who are here come here because they're energy vampires. And there are so many people here, and it's so easy to get the public's attention that it makes it kind of a haven. Yeah, a haven for energy vampires. Alright, I think that's enough of this for now. I'm going to be burning this black magic incense. To help us think about getting energy vampires out of our lives, right? Now, recognizing people who are an energetic drain to you. So, for example, how drained do you feel after you hang out with somebody? If you feel like a healthy amount of drained and you're willing to give that person that much of your energy, that's fine, you know, and especially if they're not toxic in other ways. Like, sometimes energy vampires can be like pretty toxic in their personality, but that's not always the case. In fact, I would say that's one of the bigger misconceptions, that in order to be classified as an energy vampire, somebody has to have a toxic personality. It's not really true. How are they going to get people to be around them long enough for them to drain their energy? If they're super toxic, they're not. So, and just kind of like imagine this smoke enveloping you and creating like a force field around your energy. Around your energy. Unfortunately, the only way that you can tell if someone is draining your energy is that you start to feel drained. And sometimes it's difficult to extricate yourself from a situation when that happens. I am actually an introvert. I don't know if that's apparent. I mean, I do play music live, and so I have forced myself to cultivate this extrovert personality. But the truth is that I get very drained from being around people for too long. I had to train myself not to be like that. And you can train yourself to be like that. But it takes a lot of substances like Xanax or Klonopin that are like anti-anxiety type medications. But really what you want to do is understand that most of the people that you meet are going to be more messed up than you are. And not to judge, but anything that they have to say to you judgment-wise, you just have to consider the source. And I still lie awake at night and agonize over so many of the interactions that I've had with other people. So you're not alone in that either. But basically, if you find yourself being drained in a situation, it's good to be able to make an excuse, and excuses are fine in this context, or some kind of other, like, I'm not feeling well, I think I need to go lie down, oh, I think I just ate something that didn't agree with me. You can say something like that if you don't feel like just being forthright with the person. Like, how many people do you really owe honesty to if you've just met somebody? Like, you don't need to tell them your whole life story. You can come up with something that's just an easy excuse. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A lot of people who are closer to you and are energy vampires, as you continue to work on yourself and continue on your own personal journey, a lot of times those people will fall away from you, and it can be kind of sad to end those relationships with people that even sometimes they're your parents or close siblings or other friends that you've known for a long time. If they're draining you very heavily, they're probably acting from a lower vibration. And as you raise your vibration, they're going to be out of sync with you, and they're going to end up falling away from you. Now, it is important to be careful and to open up possibilities for yourself in other spaces. Because if you're living with somebody and their frequency is really misaligned with yours, you could find yourself in a situation, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but they might end up lashing out at you. So just be very careful. And I'm not saying, halt your own development just so these other people don't lash out at you. But I am telling you that that's something that could possibly occur. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to discuss is the different types of energy drains, whether they are attached to people or whether they are situational or even environmental. And I'll put the incense down here. processes. That's fine. I think a lot of man-made crystals are really beautiful and very useful. And I also have the old chestnut selenite. So I'll be just kind of using these to brush through your field and rejuvenate your energy. The tip of this one is a little bit chipped, but I don't think that'll make a difference. You can use whatever kind of, like, even if you find a piece of broken glass in the parking lot or on the beach, if you think it's really beautiful and it resonates with you, I encourage you to use it. So now we're going to talk about the different kinds of energetic drains. And the first one we'll discuss, of course, is energy vampires. Energy vampires can transfer energy from you to themselves. And there are a lot of different reasons why somebody might do this. I know people who deal with like chronic fatigue, and they do it kind of as a necessity. But people who are doing it out of necessity because of some kind of underlying condition are less likely to leave you fully drained, because they know what that's like, and they wouldn't do that to someone else. And if they do, they're toxic and you don't need them in your life. There are also people who are basically, their persona that they are showing you is probably a fabrication that requires a lot of energy. And so those people will also be vampiric energetically. There can also be cases where, especially in the case of performers, and I know people like this too, they're energy vampires in order to maintain the level of energy that they need to perform. And so most of the vampirism that they're taking part in is purely an extension of that, and probably doesn't extend too far outside of that unless there's other performance going on. See figure 2. Some people are energy vampires because they like the feeling of power. It gives them like this surge of energy, and they just really get off on that. And those people will drain you the worst. So be very careful around them. A lot of times these people are middle management supervisor types. I know, seems obvious. Like the Colin Robinsons, if any of you have seen What We Do in the Shadows. That's your Colin Robinson type, and they really are some of the most dangerous. But they're kind of also the most blatant in some ways too. Like everybody knows what his game is and why he's doing what he's doing. So I love the sound of this one too. be vampires. But it really falls into those types of categorical groups. So, there are people who are energy vampires because they are toxic. There are people who are energy vampires because nobody's perfect. And then there are energy vampires who are doing it out of necessity, out of a true need. And it's really important to recognize the differences, because you can have, people who genuinely need extra energy, and they might not necessarily be toxic to be around, and they might not drain you fully. It might just be like little sips of energy, And in that case, I would say it's not necessary to cut that person out of your life unless you start to notice that they're taking more and more out of you. And they're less likely to be one of these people who falls away as you raise your vibration. So somebody doesn't necessarily have to have a low vibration to be an energy vampire. It's just that those two things do often go hand in hand. There are also people who are not energy vampires themselves, and these people often have a very chaotic presence to them, either underlying or right out there in the open. People who are being controlled by egregores or demons. And an egregore, in this case, is probably just a lower vibrational entity that is getting ready to cross over into demonic activity. People can be influenced by demons even if they're not fully possessed by them. And demonic possession doesn't always look like the vomiting pea soup that you see in the movies either. A lot of times people can be tormented by, we'll call them extra physical entities. So like an egregore, for example, unless it falls into the category of a servitor, it can be very chaotic, and even sometimes servitors are set up for the purpose of draining somebody's energy. These egregores are things like addiction, and this can be like cigarettes, this can be video games, this can be alcohol, it can be anything. You can be addicted to anything that you compulsively use, like a crutch. And that takes on its own energy and it becomes an egregore, and it needs energy to have a form, and the more you fight it sometimes, the stronger it becomes. And so that can be the source of an energetic drain for the person themselves, and then it can leak over, especially if you are married or in a relationship with somebody who is dealing with addiction. a lot of times that leaks over into your existence in an energetic way, aside from all the other chaotic stuff that happens. And I'm not saying this to be judgmental. I'm saying it because can be a source of energetic drain. And a lot of times, like when you're in a situation like that, you're really not thinking about your own needs. And it's important to keep your own energy levels at a higher vibration than what's going on with your partner, or with your friend, or with your sibling when they're going through this. That's very important. And as I mentioned before, it might cause them to lash out at you, but you can't take that personally, because it's not, it hurts, but it's not the totality, and it's not who they are, it's what they're going through. There can also be cases of demonic possession. Now, demons can make you do these destructive things, and this is where we kind of, I'm going to talk about generational curses here a little bit, because sometimes those are coming from demons or egregores, and so these generational curses can also be an energetic drain. Even if you're not the one who's being afflicted with the generational curse. And just because you have bad luck doesn't mean you have a generational curse either. What you're looking for, and I'll probably go over this in a different video, is like repeated misfortunes. Like all the women in this family are sterile, or all of the, which, I guess that could happen and still carry on the line somewhat. Or like, all the firstborn sons die an unnatural early death, something like that. So, those can also be draining for the person that's happening to, as well as anyone who gets close to them. And then there are cases where you're just interacting with random people and you find that somebody is very draining on your energy. If they're also very chaotic, it's likely that they're not an energy vampire, but that they have something draining their energy, and that by extension they drain the energy of the people around them. And so it can work in two ways. In one way, they could become an energy vampire because their energy is being depleted. Anybody who deals with fatigue or malaise or low energy over a long-term period, myself included, can have the potential to become an energy vampire. So that can be one mechanism. And then the second mechanism, of course, is that the person is just enveloped by the entity, and the entity is siphoning energy off of the people around them. So the next situation I'm going to talk about is locations that can be energetically draining. I don't know is maintaining a YouTube channel in memoriam and to carry on the work that they were doing in their lifetime, and I invite you to go check it out. But basically, haunted locations can be energetically draining, especially the more entities that you have there. And people who live in haunted places, the energy gets sucked out of them, so that the entities that are present there can manifest. And obviously, like, there could be a location that has spirits in it, but if they're not siphoning energy off of the living and acting out in manifestation, then nobody really considers that a haunting. Nobody notices that because it's not a problem, right? But it could still exist. So you have haunted locations where these, again, extra physical entities are siphoning energy off of the living in order to manifest any kind of phenomena, whether it's poltergeist, anything like that. And poltergeist activity, we'll have to talk about that later, because that's not the same as an actual manifestation of haunting. That borders more on demonic possession, but again, it's more like an egregore than it is like a demon. So we'll talk about that more in a different video, but this is the selenite now. So haunted locations can absolutely siphon off your energy, and you may, there might even be a certain amount of exchange of energy, especially if entities are trying to communicate with you. You might feel an exchange of energy. There are also, and I've noticed this quite a bit in America, and I don't know if it exists in other places, but there are locations that, like Sedona, Arizona, for example, where it has nothing to do with anything that humans have brought to that location. It has nothing to do with anything that used to be corporeal, really. Something about the way that the land formed itself has this certain effect. The vortexes can be very draining, actually. My friend and I got really sick when we went there. Sedona is the kind of place where anybody, even if they have like literally zero intuitive faculties, will feel something. And so if you go there and you're very highly attuned, and especially if your vibration is out of sync, and we had been to Chaco Canyon right before that. Anyway, it can be a very, like I felt physically ill for a lot of the time that I was there. We still had fun, but I don't know if I would go back. And like I mentioned, Chaco Canyon, and Los Angeles has a tendency to have a lot of energetic shift in it as well. One thing that people forget about Los Angeles is that this used to be a very sacred site, and no amount of concrete is going to pave over the energy that is held within the land itself. So that's something to keep in mind as well, that these are not energies that can be exercised. Locations like whenever I go to Costco, I get a sore throat and I spend the next day in bed sometimes. And those are locations where you might have a concentration of energetic vampires in one place, and that might be why you end up feeling really drained after going there. And also corporations in general. Corporations feed off of our energy, whether that's finances or your energy just outright. And logos are meant to feed into that. I mean, I could do a whole video about the insidious way that corporations infiltrate into your life to steal your energy. But we won't do that today. Just know that, yes, the experience you have after coming home from Target and crashing on your couch and falling asleep for an hour, there's a reason that that happens. So what can I do? What can I do if I have to shop at a big box store because that's the only grocery store in my neighborhood? I live in a food desert and I have to drive 20 minutes just to get to a Walmart. And every time I go there, I feel drained. What do I do? Well, let me tell you. The first key is to understand what you're about to walk into. And that, like a lot of times, all it takes is being conscious of the fact that this is a draining situation, whether that's with a one-on-one energy vampire encounter, somebody who's just chaotic, or an energy draining location. Sometimes it's just enough to be conscious of that when you go into that situation. Other things you can do, you can take a ritual bath before and after, or just after. But really, if you do it only after, it's like, taking a vaccine after you've been infected with something. Like, it's not going to be effective other than to wash off any attachments that might have connected you to another person, for example. So you want to do something before, and I say ritual bath, but you can even do like smoke cleansing before you go out. Just make sure that you are impregnating your personal bubble with this energy. Yeah, you can just look in my eyes. Don't worry about looking anywhere in particular so much. Just don't look directly at the light. Yeah, so definitely you can smoke cleansing. You can also use amulets. Now, I have a green watchet eye that I carved out of a verdite stone. It's like a very soft stone. But I often wear that when I'm going into situations that I think might be energetically draining, or anytime I feel like I need protection. And I do keep that on the altar with Sekhmet a lot of times when I'm not using it. And I think coming up soon I probably will do a video about how to have relationships with entities. I don't mean like a physical relationship would be, I just mean like how to cultivate friendships and devotional practice with these entities, based on my own experience, because of course every tradition has its own set of rituals and guidelines, so I can only speak as to what I have experienced and kind of go into a little bit certain other practices that I'm aware of. But especially like whatever entity, whatever deities you're working with, they probably have protective aspects to them. And so you can also, like Saint Michael, or the Archangel Michael, is a really good example of a protective deity that you can invoke. You don't even really have to be Christian, but and his colors are like dark blue, but sometimes they're red and green. So you can also wear those colors and think about Saint Michael, and there are different prayers you can say, and you can say a prayer like that before you go into one of these situations. Selenite is good for purification, but it's really mostly good for clearing things out. So you can use that after you've had an encounter that was draining. But what you really want going into an encounter like that is black tourmaline or ocean jasper, because those will be more effective at blocking negative energies coming from other people. Black tourmaline specifically, ocean jasper is better for like interpersonal dealings. So if the person is really toxic on top of being an energy vampire, ocean jasper would be effective. But then on top of that, you've got like different Catholic medals you could use, a rosary. There are amulets like the agla or a tetragrammaton. I really recommend the tetragrammaton. Was like one of the first amulets that was not Egyptian that I got, and it really helps a lot. And people say like, oh, use it for prosperity and everything like that, but really what you're doing is you're blocking negative energies. The tetragrammaton is the fourfold name of God. Yod, He, Vav, He, tetragrammaton. Tetra meaning four, grammaton meaning the four-letter word, basically. And is represented, there's correspondences to the four elements, to the four cardinal directions, to the four archangels. And that all ties in as well to the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, of course. And I did a video about that like a while ago, but you can still find it, and I still stand by my work on that video. So then I've touched on in a couple of ways things things that you can do after you have encountered someone or a place or something that is an energetic drain. Basically, you want to make sure that, especially in cases where it's a person that you're dealing with, and that they might have created an etheric tie to you so that they can use you as a source for energy when you're not around. Like, it's very easy to create etheric ties with people, especially the more intuitive that you are. If you can reach them on the astral plane, you can create an etheric tie with that person. So even like if you have an ex who's still obsessed with you years and years later, even they can create an etheric tie with you. But only if they're like intuitive enough to do that, if they can get on the astral plane and do that. Just because your ex is still obsessed with you years later does not mean they are an energetic drain on your life, that's for sure. But sometimes that is the case. And in order to cut anything like that, you could take a ritual bath. And I went over in one of my other videos, there's a book called Deliverance that's part of the Lucky Mojo series, and that has a lot of really good techniques in there for, I mean, it's about uncrossing conditions and stuff like that, but it's also very effective for cutting those cords. And I say cutting cords because that's the popular terminology. That's a really poor way of describing what's actually going on, by the way, and we'll go into that in a different video. But yeah, so there's quite a few things that you can do. Ritual baths, reading psalms, I recommend, or other prayer type rituals that are designed for protection. So I use psalms and things like that because they're readily available and you really don't have to be a Christian to use them. Because anybody who believes in deity, if you are getting messed up enough by metaphysical and extra-physical things to seek out protection, you're probably not 100% an atheist anymore. You believe there's something out there that's bigger than you. And that's what Psalms are really saying. That's what the idea of a monotheistic God is. So you can use those regardless of your own personal relationship with religion. But if you are working within a specific system, you can also use the protective tools within that system. Like I mentioned, the Wadjet Eye is really powerful, and especially if you're working with the Neteru, that would be a good one to use, depending on which Neter you're working with. Like if you're working with Set, obviously you're not going to use Wadjet Eye. You're going to use something that is particular to him because he's about protection too. But you will probably know what to do because he'll be telling you about it. And there are also, like, you want to be careful about bindings, though. Because a binding works both ways. You're not just binding something else, you're then also still energetically tied to it until that binding is undone. So you're either undoing or cutting bindings if you want to get away from energetically draining things. And then to replenish the energy that has been drained as part of my practice, I have a possessions, but it can also be theft of energy. And I know that if energy is stolen from me, my ward will bring it back to me, or will tell me what is going on so that I can go back and get it myself. And that's a servitor that I set up, so I probably will do a different video about servitors, but I don't want to give too many details about that servitor in particular, and I think you can probably understand why. I'm not going to show you how my security system is set up, right? Alright. So, I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. I love hearing from you guys, and I would love to know what your experiences have been with emotional drains and how you deal with them. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I'm a very small cottage industry. I did just make a video about how I'm going to handle members on the channel, so I invite you to check that out. I'm going to be starting a members only live stream program on Thursdays, so that will be fun for those of you. If you're already on Patreon, I'm going to figure out a way for the benefits to carry over between platforms so that you don't feel left out, because I don't want to leave people out. That's not why I'm doing this. But I really appreciate your ongoing support and all the love that I receive from you guys on a regular basis. And it really just means so much to me that you all come back time after time to watch these videos.